My name is Anita Roach, and I'm your moderator for today's webinar. It is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Dr. Kelly Cleary is the FAAR Senior Director of Education and Support Programs. She oversees FAAR's national education efforts and maintains a variety of programs, resources, and relationships for the food allergy community. Kelly completed her pediatrics residency at Newark Presbyterian Cornell and finished her pediatric emergency medicine fellowship at NYU Bellevue. Dr. Cleary is currently pursuing a master's degree in public health at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Tamara Hubbard, our other presenter, is a licensed clinical professional counselor trained in marriage and family therapy with more than 18 years of experience. Tamara is the founder and CEO of the Food Allergy Counselor, an internationally known allergy psychosocial resource hub, which houses the Food Allergy Counselor Directory, Exploring Food Allergy Families podcasts, evidence-based allergy behavioral health content, and a growing professional network of therapy providers supporting those with allergic diseases. A speaker at national conferences, Tamara is an allied health member of both the QuadAI and the ACAAI, and holds advisory roles for multiple organizations, including the Center for Food Allergy and Asthma Research. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Cleary.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for such an important topic that's facing kids, teens, young adults in every facet of life, but certainly affects those in the food allergy community disproportionately. So today, let's take a look at bullying in the general population, and then really take a close look at how bullying in the food allergy community is different. So let us first look at what bullying is. And bullying is unwanted, aggressive behavior. And it's also often a product of power imbalance. And we're going to talk a lot more about that, because that power imbalance could be either a real power imbalance or something that's perceived among peers. It may be a person, often results in a person who is hurt by words or behaviors. And it can be a repeated activity, but important to note that it can be a single event as well. So we're going to infuse all of these definitions of bullying throughout the next hour. So how common is bullying in the general population? And this study is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which was taken in 2021. And this is the survey that goes out to high school students across the country. And what it found was that about 15% of students in 9th to 12th grade reported being bullied at school. And about 16% of those same age students reported being cyberbullied. Now, the rates here for elementary school kids is probably a little bit higher. But why I mention this is to give the baseline so that we can then compare the rates that we see in food allergic kids. So in food allergic kids, unfortunately, the rate of bullying is 1 in 3. And when we think about how many kids in the United States right now have food allergies, we are looking at a ton of kids who are being affected by bullying. So estimates show that the number of kids in the United States is over 5.5 million that have food allergies. And think about that, a third of those are getting bullied because of those food allergies. So this is a really important issue, and I'm really excited to be presenting it because it is something that I am not only passionate about as a pediatrician, but also as a mom of 4 and one who has very severe food allergies. So let's look at the types of bullying in general. And I think that most of us on this call are probably really familiar with that top row. We've heard of verbal bullying. That's the teasing, taunting, threatening, name calling. Most of us are familiar with that type of bullying. We're also familiar with physical bullying, which is the hitting, spitting, punching, pinching, pushing, tripping, damaging someone's belongings. Those are the types of bullying that I think most of us, if we form an image of in our heads what bullying looks like, we picture things like that. But the definition of bullying really is broadened and can include things like social or relational bullying. And in this type of bullying, there's exclusion that's done intentionally and purposefully to really hurt someone else, or bullying that involves telling rumors about another person, or bullying that a person may say, don't be so-and-so's friend, right? So I think that we've got to really look at all of the different types of bullying so that we can understand how food allergic children or teens or young adults may be bullied as well. And I think in social and relational bullying, it's really important to point out with that power imbalance. Here, the power imbalance is not physical, right? The flexing of the power muscles here is used to hurt by doing something that we might not notice if we're not looking carefully, by excluding or something similar. And I think in today's day and age, it's really important for us to speak briefly about cyberbullying as well. Cyberbullying right now is a way that bullying is different in 2023 than it was in, let's say, 1990. So when I was growing up, if I were bullied at school and came home into my loving home where I was able to get away from that bullying at school, I had a little bit of protection. But in 2023, if a child is being bullying, that bullying can be following them to the dinner table. It could be following them to their bedroom at night. It could be following them to, as they're sleeping, hearing the beeps on their phone that they're getting more messages. So this aspect of bullying really changes the face of what's happening. And when we look at how often kids are on social media or using their devices, it's really, it strengthens the idea that we need to know what's going on those devices. 70%, and I bet this number is actually higher, of kids that are 14 to 22 use social media either daily or almost constantly. And some of the most recent reports are actually scary to me as a parent because I see these trends in my own house. But the average number of hours that an 8 to 12-year-old spends on a device during the day has been estimated to be 5 hours and 33 minutes. And for teens, 13 to 18, there was a recent survey, and it was actually written about in the New York Times, said that for 13 to 18, it was 8 hours and 39 minutes. So without knowing this part of what's going on in our kids' lives, it's really hard for us to understand the degree to which bullying might be affecting them. So again, we looked at these types of bullying, and now let's look at the types of food allergy bullying in particular. And one of a quote that I really like to use, and I probably say it a lot, but it comes from the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And it says that the message is simple, yet it often gets forgotten. The people that are living with the condition are the real experts. So in starting to analyze and look at what types of bullying happen in the food allergy community, I thought it would be best for us to go to our own experts and hear from some of our teen advisory group members, which we refer to them as TAG, and I'm probably going to refer to them as taggers. But our TAG members, we have had some members who have been so brave that they were willing to post their own stories of food allergy bullying. And it's actually on our website at foodallergy.org. And I'd like to read some of those. So first, for verbal bullying for food allergy bullying. She talked about putting peanut butter on me because I am allergic to nuts. She was making these threats behind my back, and I didn't know until my best friend told me. For social bullying, I really just wish that kids and adults could understand how hurtful it is to be excluded. It just doesn't have to be that way. For cyberbullying, I'm not sure why they thought it was so funny to send me Snapchat photos of all of those kids eating all of the foods that I can't. And for physical bullying, a boy in my class made fun of me about my milk allergy all of the time, and he decided to throw mac and cheese at me. So bullying of any type is unacceptable. But hearing these stories from our food allergy community and from our brave TAG community really makes me realize how long lasting these effects could be. In food allergic kids, bullying goes to that next level where it really can involve life and death. And I think that as parents in this community and physicians and doctors and teachers, it's really important to understand how pervasive this could be. So let's look at the effects of bullying on our kids. And this slide actually reflects the effects for those who are doing the bullying, but also those who are bullied. And what we have seen in the literature is that with bullying, we're seeing increased levels of anxiety, depression, physical harm, declined academic performance, physical complaints like frequent belly aches or headaches, and long-term substance abuse and risky behavior. And I think if we really point out some of these effects in the food allergic community, the increase in anxiety that's already skyrocketed because of a baseline, anxiety with eating foods that we can't have, but also that physical harm component. I think that we really have to make sure that we're understanding that and teaching our kids in this community what to do if exposed to it. So why do kids and people bully? And this is not meant to be an excuse in any way, shape, or form. But sometimes I think that if we're able to understand the why, then we can better approach the how to handle these situations. So sometimes we see that kids and people are bullying for power, as we mentioned, or trying in a struggle to fit in, or needing control, or they may come from families where aggression may be common, or parents are acting in authoritarian ways, or maybe uninvolved. The person who is doing the bullying may have self-esteem issues. They may not understand their emotions or have behavior or conduct issues. They also may have been bullied themselves. And again, these are not to give any justification or excuse, but really sometimes understanding the why can help us fix the how can we handle the next steps. So who is most at risk for bullying? And this is in general. And that is those who are socially isolated, those who are perceived as different from others, those who may be anxious or depressed, perceived as weak, less popular. And I think it's really important in any talk on bullying to mention the LGBTQ community, because the incidence of bullying in the LGBTQ community actually is very similar to that in the food allergy community, and estimated to be about 1 in 3 teens and young adults in that community. So I think just important to note that as well. But getting back to the food allergy population, if we look at some of those top rows here, being socially isolated and thinking about our food allergic kids who need to sit at a table aside from other kids, perceived as different, maybe needing to skip an activity for because of food allergies, or as my son's had to do many times, bring his little lunchbox to a birthday party, or ask a lot of questions at a restaurant to see if there are things that he could eat, and then the underlying anxiety. So I'd like to share a video that was created by FAIR, because this video actually gives voice to some of the children who are actually experiencing this type of bullying. It is short, but I think really powerful to help to understand what food allergic kids may experience.
You wouldn't think the cafeteria would be a scary place. But last year, someone wiped peanut butter on me.
It happened to me on the school bus. So I decided to walk for a while. It makes me not want to go to school sometimes.
There are 5.9 million kids in the US living with food allergies. And nearly 40% have suffered a severe or life-threatening reaction because of them.
School's supposed to feel safe, but sometimes I don't feel that way.
Would you believe that 1/3 of all kids with food allergies are bullied because of them?
I told them to stop. I don't understand. They just want to hurt me.
Right now, we're working on a cure for food allergies.
They tried to make me eat it, but it's like they don't get it.
Until then, there is a cure for food allergy bullying. You. Go to foodallergy.org to teach your kid about the seriousness of food allergies. You could help save a life, or help someone have a better one.
If I'm not at school, I can't get bullied.
Food allergy bullying, it's not a joke.
So my favorite part of that video is at the end, where it mentions that you can help save a life or you can make someone's better. And I think that so much of that is really woven into conversations like this, where communities, whether you're a caregiver, a parent, a teacher, a dietitian at the school, a school nurse, that we can really be creating an environment that is better for these kids. So I love that last line. But again, in looking at these types of bullying, we heard some of these being weaved into that video. We see that especially in the food allergy community, we're concerned for that physical component of bullying, where it can reflect a life or death moment for these kids. This is a study that was published in the Journal of Pediatrics a few years back by Dr. Shemesh, who is a psychiatrist at Mount Sinai, and really looked at food allergy bullying in this population. And as you could see, one of the things that's interesting is teasing is still, these are percentages, 42% of those kids who were surveyed were teased about their food allergies. But the part with the physical component that I'd like to point out is that 30% spoke about having food waved at them, 12% forced to touch food, 10% had food thrown at them, and 3% had other acts with food. So this is something where I think increasing awareness between both caregivers, parents, and also schools and communities and activities is really important for us to emphasize as we move forward. So one of the surprising things that was also seen out of the study that was published from the Mount Sinai team was that 48% of parents were unaware of the bullying that was happening in their food allergic child. And when we start to think about why would that be, we think about sometimes our kids, teens, young adults are embarrassed to tell us. Sometimes they are disappointed that it's happening and don't want to disappoint us or make us upset or sad. Sometimes there's a fear of retaliation and that telling someone could make things worse. Sometimes there's a fear of isolation. And I think acknowledging and knowing why sometimes this bullying is not disclosed to parents is important, because as Tamara is going to talk to us about in a little bit, opening those lines of communication will really help to make a difference in this whole concern as a whole. So how does parental knowledge of bullying change the course of bullying? And that actually was another thing that came out of Dr. Shemesh's study, was that once parents knew, the percent of kids who were endorsing that they were anxious decreased, and the quality of their life actually increased. So just by a parent knowing what was happening to their child, their anxiety decreased and their quality of life increased. So why and how could that be possible? Well, the first thing is that it allows parents to understand and recognize signs and symptoms of bullying, and if signs and symptoms are worsening. You'll see that as we go through some of these signs and symptoms, that these are similar for signs and symptoms for anxiety and depression. So really taking note of that and knowing when we may need to seek further help through a medical professional or your child's pediatrician. But signs and symptoms of bullying certainly include unexplained injuries, damaged personal belongings, school avoidance. So a child who always loved going to school, but now can't get out of the door in the morning and doesn't want to go. This headaches and stomach aches often fall into what we call somatic complaints. So, constant stomach aches at school that you're getting called for, not wanting to be there and saying that they can't go to school in the morning. social isolation, and then all of the changes in grades, the changes in interests, the change in behavior, change in appearance is certainly another one to think about. And especially in our kids, I like to think about a change in appetite reflected in, is their lunch not getting eaten? Did they decide not to sit at the lunch table for some reason? And really taking note of some of those nuanced things that if we weren't aware that this is happening, these are things that can clue us in. So what can parents do? And the first thing is that if the child is threatened by food, I think that it's really important as food allergy parents or teachers or anyone involved in their life is to teach your child that if you're threatened by food, walk away. And I actually have to say that this came from something that I read it was an interview done with Dr. Shemesh from Mount Sinai. And as a parent and pediatrician, I had never thought to talk to my son about if someone threatens you with a food that you can't eat, you need to run, walk away, get away, ensure your physical safety. So I think that's a big take home point for me. Tell a trusted adult. And this is certainly true in any form of bullying, that kids really need to be able to tell a responsible, trusted adult. Let your child know that this is not his or her fault. If they're bullied in any other way, and these are ways that we can start to teach our child to understand and handle if they are bullied, saying things like, stop, leave me alone, this is not appropriate. Some kids are able to infuse humor into the situation to walk away and get themselves out of that situation. Also, telling a trusted adult in every scenario is important. And one of the ones that I like to talk about with my own kids is finding common ground, because as we mentioned before, sometimes bullying surfaces because of all of these differences. But if kids realize and teens realize that there's more common ground than they realize, that could be a segue into changing the conversation. So, I tell my son, maybe you're not able to go into the ice cream parlor and get an ice cream cone with your friends, but you are able to tell them, hey, let's go play a competitive game of basketball in the park after. Or, I might not be able to eat that piece of cake, but I think we all like Skittles. And so really finding some common ground to give your child or teen, some sort of way to diffuse the conversation. And then really knowing before the bullying starts, what could we be doing? And this is where some of the video really hits home for me in increasing awareness of food allergies among school communities, educators, coaches in every single way we can. And that's the baseline of just teaching about food allergies, why it's serious, what could actually happen. This is life or death. Thinking about increasing awareness of bullying, because many people don't realize that kids with food allergies are more prone to being bullied. Let your kids know that they have your back, that you have their back, and open the lines of communication with your child. And this is where, Tamara is going to go through this with you, but being proactive rather than reactive. And I think that opening the lines of communication is key. So at that, I'm going to toss the baton to Tamara.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Cleary. So picking up where she left off, and I noticed I've been looking at the comments coming through, and it's not uncommon to hear in these kinds of webinars that parents of kids who are maybe at earlier stages, they have little babies or infants or toddlers with food allergies, start to get a little bit anxious when they think about these kinds of potential experiences their kids might have, or the school years and beyond. And so I just want to offer a reassuring note there that each stage of allergy parenting, you gain more information, knowledge, and confidence to build upon. So of course, if you're sitting with a younger child now, just know that as you grow as an allergy parent, your knowledge and your confidence to handle these kinds of situations, should they happen, grow as well. So, but going back to what Dr. Cleary was talking about, There are huge benefits of proactively discussing bullying, and that doesn't mean that we have to wait until our child is experiencing bullying or witnessing bullying at school. It's really opening the conversation of what Dr. Cleary talked about before. Why do some people bully? What is happening with that child or that adult, in the case of adult bullying, to help our kids understand that, gain compassion, and then drive their proactive strategies for solving those problems. It also allows for if-then discussions. So I like to talk about, especially in the case of anxiety, and the topic of bullying does tend to trigger anxiety, both for kids and adults, that instead of thinking about what if that happens at school, well, if that happens, then we'll do what? So it's a little bit more problem-solving focus than a what if thought or what if discussion. And then also proactively talking about this makes it easier for your kids to talk to you should they end up being bullied at school, which we'll get to in a later slide. I also like to bring up the fact that when we think about bullying, and certainly when ourselves or our children experience bullying situations, that it's very emotional. And so it's important as parents and caregivers that we're mindful of these various emotions that might show up. And, in some instances, kids who are resilient and sort of tough and not letting things bother them, they may not experience the intensity or frequency of the emotions that we as the caregivers and parents experience. So it's important for us to identify our own feelings and not project them, and then be mindful of our word choices, right? We may be so frustrated and angry about the bullying experiences because we're hurting for our child, but we need to make sure that the words we're using are age appropriate when we're discussing this with our children or in front of our children, because little ears can hear very long ways. And use emotional language that helps them learn how to identify their own feelings. We don't want to assume what their feelings are. We want to ask open-ended questions about how they're feeling so that we get an understanding of where our feelings are and where their feelings are. And then, of course, emotionally validating our child and what they're feeling inside, what they're thinking inside too. So if we want to talk to our kids about bullying and your child is willing to talk about it, let's say in the instance of they're being bullied or they're witnessing bullying, here are some great tips to remember in that situation. So we want to do more listening than talking. I think, especially as parents, and I think it's important to note that I'm an allergy parent as well. I have a child with a life-threatening food allergy. We want to teach. We want to give them strategies. We want to do a whole lot of talking because we want to take away their discomfort and their pain. And as a loving parent, that makes sense. But when they are ready to talk about bullying, it's important that we're doing more listening than talking, and that we're using their words in the way that they describe how it feels for them. We want to applaud their openness and willingness, again, emotionally validate their thoughts and feelings, acknowledge their bravery and courage for talking about it and dealing with it. And then remind them that you're a team, that together you, the family, and hopefully the school or wherever the bullying is occurring, the staff and the adults in those situations are going to come together as a team and figure out a way to problem solve it. This is also a wonderful opportunity to role play scenarios and strategies that Dr. Cleary talked about, right? What do we do if we're being bullied with our allergen, right? That's going to be a situation where we don't sit and discuss it with the bully. We leave, we get ourselves to safety, versus if there's verbal bullying going on, what strategies can we try and take there first? And of course, we want to talk about what is self-advocacy and how can you be assertive when you need to. And with shy kids, that's especially hard. So that's something, even outside of bullying, we can start to foster in our children from a young age. And of course, we want to praise their problem-solving efforts. They're trying to work through it, and we want to praise them for those efforts. If your child isn't willing to talk about experiences they may be having of bullying or experiences they may be witnessing, Again, I think it's one of those times as parents and caregivers, it triggers emotions inside of us. We're frustrated. We just want to help them. We really, really want to get them to talk. But I think the important thing to lead with here is we don't want to force anything. If they're not ready to talk about it, going back to the previous slide that Dr. Cleary showed, where kids sometimes are embarrassed or afraid of letting people down or the judgment they may receive, we need to nurture those feelings, and we need to talk to those feelings versus the feelings we're having, which say, I've got to get my child to talk about it right here and now so we can solve this in this moment. Start the conversation, and you can do so by sharing observations, right? So I've noticed you're spending lots of time alone lately. How are things going for you at school? And you can ask them, if they're not really opening up, what would make them feel more comfortable and ready to share, especially if they say something like, yes, there's something going on at school, but I really don't want to talk about it, or I don't feel comfortable talking about it. Then ask them what would make them feel more comfortable to talk about it with you. Let them know you're there when they're ready to talk about it, and also remind them that they don't have to talk just to you about it. If there's another trusted adult in their world, a coach, a teacher, a pastor, another parent, a parent of a friend, and for some reason they feel more comfortable starting the conversation about their experiences with them, that's okay too. And it might be helpful in these situations to ask, or let them know, I'd like to check in with your teacher just to see how they feel things are going, and let them know that you're going to do that, or ask if they're okay with that. When we think about advocating for our child, I broke this down into two different areas I'd like to focus on. And the first is our approach. Now, as a mama bear, as I lovingly refer to myself, if my child is in a situation where they're being bullied or excluded because of their food allergy or otherwise, my first instinct is to, I'm going to go and I'm going to come in strong and I'm going to come and figure it out and we're going to solve this. But unfortunately, when we start off that way, we tend to decrease the amount of problem solving and willingness that the school or the other adults are going to give us. So we want to be very focused on what we're trying to solve, the solutions that we're trying to create. We want to reach out to the school to set up a meeting or wherever that is, if it's a coach for activities. We need to prepare the facts and concrete examples. Again, kind of keeping it, the emotion piece can be in there, but we want to keep it focused on what's actually happening. We want to stay solution focused, but at the same time, be open-minded, right? So the exact way that we would like the situation to be solved and the bullying to stop may not be the way that the school is going to suggest. And we need to be willing to listen and understand why they might be suggesting a specific solution, and then figure out a way to compromise and make sure that your non-negotiables are being accomplished, right? The non-negotiable for sure would be your child's safety. And at the end of the day, no matter what strategy is suggested, we need to make sure that they are safe. And of course, if necessary, involving administration and support services like a school social worker or psychologist. As far as communication, when we're advocating for our child in a situation of bullying, is we want to manage our own emotions. Again, talking about that mama bear or that daddy bear, or that, parenting piece, that loving parenting piece, wanting to sort of come up and be strong and assert and aggressive. We're better off being assertive, which is different than aggressive, and managing our emotions in a way that we can stay focused on what we're trying to achieve. If useful or helpful, or your child is okay with doing so, sharing their own words. It can be in statements or examples of what they've shared with you after they've come home and told you about the bullying experiences. And we should make sure that we're not assuming anything from the school or the other staff or the other adults we're talking about, right? So we might read into something they say, and instead of doing so, it's important that we ask clarifying questions. So I hear that you're saying this. What does that mean if we try to do this, right? And a lot of times parents will come into sessions with me and say, well, I've tried to bring up bullying and solving bullying problems at school, and I'm being met with resistance. So what do I do now? And my response is usually then respond with, well, what can be done, right? Here's the problem. You're saying we can't do this. Then push back with, well, what can be done? And use it as a starting point to build off of. So if we want to teach our child to self-advocate for themselves, these are important things that we should start teaching even when they're young and they're not experiencing bullying or they're not in school, right? They can self-advocate at home as well. So we want to teach them how to ask for help, and we can role model that, and we can play that in scenarios, right, with the toys, and they can be the adult and we can be the child and show them how we would ask for help in different situations. We want to give them emotional language skills. So we want them to be able to tell you, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling hurt, or I'm feeling scared. And so we have to give them that language. We have to model it when we talk about our own feelings, and we have to help them name their feelings when we're observing the behaviors that they're sharing that make us think that they might be experiencing struggles at school or elsewhere. We want them to critically think as well, right? So as parents, sometimes we want to just swoop right in and solve the problems for our kids, but that limits their ability to develop critical thinking skills, right? And have independence and ownership over things. So we want to be there and we want to teach them, but we also want to give them space to try to get through things themselves. And the hardest part, especially with a food allergic child, is that we have to give them space to try things, and there will be mistakes, right? And not every mistake is dangerous. So we have to be willing to allow them to go through normal child development stages, which means trying things on their own and not solving the problems immediately for them, because we want to keep them from feeling uncomfortable. And then, of course, we want to teach them how to be assertive versus aggressive, or how to speak up if they're feeling shy, and how to communicate with others when they need to make sure that they're being kept safe. When we talk about bullying, resilience often comes up, right? Resilience, what is it? We know that we want to help our children and ourselves be more resilient as allergy families. So what exactly is resilience? Well, resilience is the process and outcome of overcoming and adapting to challenging life experiences. And that's not just living with a food allergy or allergic disease diagnosis, right? We have challenging life experiences all the time on a daily basis, right? They might have a test coming up that feels very challenging for them, right? So being resilient when things maybe don't go well and how to keep pushing forward is a useful life skill beyond just managing a food allergy. It helps with managing stress and feelings of anxiety and uncertainty. And hello, food allergy diagnosis, right? When we're managing food allergy, there is a level of anxiety and uncertainty that we live with on a daily basis. It's important to know that resilience can change over time, and that's especially true if we're faced with a new trauma or challenge. And so it's something that a set of skills that we need to continue to nurture, grow, and practice and work on with our kids in each new type of situation and age and stage of their development. So how do we help our kids develop resilience? Well, we can model connection and empathy, right? That goes back to, again, what Dr. Cleary was saying about when we have the conversations proactively about bullying, we can help them understand why someone would bully, and we can model what an empathic response would be. One of the things too, I want to make sure to say is that when we're managing food allergies, and as a parent of a child or teen with food allergies, we tend to use the tool of avoidance a lot, right? And the metaphor that I give is that if I have different DIY projects in my house, I'm not going to use a hammer for every single one of those projects, or I might end up busting something. It works well for hammering a nail into a wall, but I certainly don't want to fix the TV with a hammer. And so when we think about avoidance as a tool in living with food allergy, it's useful when we want to avoid our allergen or avoid really unsafe situations. But sometimes we, as parents, because we don't want to trigger anxiety or make them scared, We avoid talking about very hard topics such as having anaphylactic reactions or experiencing bullying. And I would encourage you to consider ways to work those topics into conversations age appropriately, even before it's something that they might experience, because it desensitizes these kids from thinking these are these big, bad, scary things, and helps them develop resilience and a mindset that if that happens, then I have the skills and strategies to get through it. Again, helping them build resilience by developing daily routines for comfort and to know what to expect. We teach them basic self-care skills, perspective taking skills. And what I mean by perspective taking skills is that when we are anxious or scared or experiencing something challenging, we tend to get tunnel vision and we see things one way. It can be helpful for us to teach our kids looking at things through different lenses. It might be a lens of another person. You know, what would your friend see if they saw someone being bullied, or if they observed you being bullied? What might you say to a friend? They can also look at perspective of, you know, this feels really hard to go through right now, but in 6 months from now, how do you think you'll feel? In 6 days from now, how do you think you'll feel if you get through this tough situation? So perspective taking means looking at the bigger picture, taking different things into account, and not just staying focused on the here and now and the way that we're feeling in this very moment. We also want to teach them emotional and stress regulation strategies. That could be everything from deep breathing, and there's a ton of videos on YouTube about box or square breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, and different ways to help decrease the intensity of our emotions so that we can focus back on problem solving in tough situations. We want to model acceptance of change and challenges. We want to teach our kids that unfortunately in life, the constant is change, and that change doesn't necessarily mean something bad, although it makes us feel uncomfortable, and so we assume it's bad. That change is a normal, natural part of life, and that we can be resilient and strong to go with the flow of change. And we want to teach goal setting and forward movement, that just because something difficult happens, such as bullying at school, doesn't mean we aren't going to find our way through it and move forward.
Well, thanks, Tamara. We are about to wrap up with this portion and take some questions, but just as some take-home points, first, if threatened by food, I think that we've really focused on, if a child is threatened by food, safety first. Have them walk away. Don't be afraid to involve other people, and other people should be involved, so that modeling of behavior to see you reach out to school administrators, doctors, if this is happening, that so will your child be able to reach out to trusted adults. So if threatened by food, walking away. I think we really talked a lot today about open communication, and really emphasize that having those proactive rather than reactive conversations with our kids just sets the stage for them being able to tell us, and that exchange of information maybe before anything is happening, equipping them with the tools. If this does happen, then what would you do? Under opening communication, I really think we also have to focus on creating awareness within our communities, the school community, our community, maybe at a sporting event, our children's friends. The awareness of what food allergies really are, and that bullying can affect kids with food allergies, is really important in creating an environment where they don't happen. I'm a big fan of using teachable moments. And in fact, we had one last night for my son, who went to a friend's house with a whole bunch of boys. And instead of eating something that he couldn't make, the boys suggested that my son be involved in making the food that he can make. And when he came home and told me this, I said, wow, that was really great. Not only do I hope that you thank him, but pay it forward. Next time you see someone excluded, maybe in a classroom setting or in a sport, bring them in and make them feel like they're part of that team. And so not just using sometimes the moments where we think, okay, this could have been done differently, but in the moments where this was done really well, let's see how we could do that again. Please don't forget to involve your pediatrician, your allergist, your teacher, your coach, administrators at the school, especially when food is being threatened to children that have life or death food allergies. We have to really involve the whole team, because this is a really serious situation. We went through some of those signs and symptoms, and really understanding that there are some times that we do need to escalate and talk to the pediatrician or allergist about what's coming up next. My child is really socially isolated. My child, the changes I'm seeing in my child are starting to get serious, and he or she is not participating in things that they used to love. They're not going to school. Please involve your pediatrician and medical team. And resilience, I think Tamara and I both love this because creating resilience in our kids in this community is a necessity. And I love this quote, which comes from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. They did a whole, the science of resilience. So even on the days when I lay my head down and think about all of the parenting things that I could have done differently, I always kind of have a little bit of solace in that kids will do well, even with serious hardship, when they have one stable, committed relationship and support of an adult. And I think that that is a testament to all of us that are on this webinar, whether teachers, caregivers, parents, we are providing that for the food allergy kids in our lives. So with that, I will stop sharing. And thank you.
Dr. Cleary, Tamara, that presentation was fantastic. Thank you for all of your expertise and providing your experience to all of us today. I certainly learned a lot. And from your presentation, we have a number of questions from the audience that I would love to share with you. So our first question really dovetails off of the topic around open communication. And so one of our viewers asked, how can you answer questions from your child's peers, from other adults, like how allergic are they, without making your child a target of bullying? So how do you differentiate between questions that are meant to keep your child safe versus questions that might make them a target?
I can start there, Tamara. One of the ways, and to be fair, that is probably my favorite question that I get from my son's friends, is when they're asking and interested about his allergies. So the first thing I try to do, and again, I know that there are tons of approaches, but I do try to find that common ground. So I think about, okay, so how this affects my son in this way, just like this may affect you, if I know that they have things that are going on in their, their medical world that have been shared. And I really focus on, it is avoidance at that point. If they're asking me how allergic he is, I don't want to, kind of minimize that in any way. But what I do, really focus on is the commonality of things that they have between us. Yes, he is allergic to this, and this could really hurt him. However, that's not going to affect you when you guys are playing soccer or basketball or swimming. This may really, affect him if he ate peanuts, but if you eat peanuts and you're a great friend to him and wash your hands and your face, then you're helping him in that way. So I probably don't focus on how allergic he is. I do focus on keeping him safe and what he can do, in a reciprocal relationship for them, but then also really focusing on that common ground.
Yeah, and that was an excellent response. The only thing I would add is that, again, focusing on if you're talking with older kids too, maybe preteen, tween, teen, focus on symptoms, right? We don't have to talk about how allergic. That's not necessarily information that we really want to be giving out anyhow, or that we necessarily have ascertained by our own allergist. It's just they are allergic, and here are the symptoms, and here's what we do if. And I also, kind of connected to this, would love to add the fact that it's important that we help our own kids and their friends understand that their food allergy or food allergies are just one piece of who they are. There's so much more to our children than just their food allergy. And I know as allergy parents, we want to spend a lot of our time focusing on that because we want to keep them safe and diminish any discomfort they might feel because of their allergy. But it's important that we find some balance between that too, so that we help them stay connected for themselves and their friends with the other commonalities and things that they have in common besides just having a food allergy.
And Tamara, I love that too, because I think, what you hit home on there was the age specific nature of this. And as kids get older, I think that's a great opportunity for their friends to be that protective factor too. And know, okay, they're a second set of eyes looking out for their friends, knowing what the signs and symptoms are and knowing how to protect their friends. So I think it really is age specific in how you would handle that.
And along the lines of that, the life journey, age specific, one of our questions was, how do you separate some of the signs and symptoms of bullying with what might be considered normal teen behaviors?
I laugh because I have almost 14 and 16-year-old boys at home. So yes, living it. I don't want to, jump in too much on what you might cover, Dr. Cleary, but again, it's conversations. And I would throw in too that, again, and you mentioned it in your slide, that some of these might be anxiety behaviors as well. So we need context. We need context to understand the function of the behaviors we're seeing, the function of the emotions that we're seeing from our children, right? And again, mom of 2 teenage boys here, we're not going to get these long, lengthy monologues about what's going on, but we need to help them understand that as a parent who is developing trust in their child or their children, especially with food allergy, as they gain more independence, that trust has to build. And in order to build that trust so that we can give them the independence, we have to be able to have enough conversation from them and response from them that we can ascertain the context of the behaviors we're seeing and where they're coming from.
Yeah, I agree. I think the question asked is one that we get asked a lot in terms of, how do I know what's typical versus atypical? And where I look at that in the spectrum, especially of anxiety and depression, is there are a few things. I look to see, are things getting worse and not better? Is this atypical from what's going on in other kids, teens in the same age group? I always think about, do I have a safety concern for my child, for themselves or someone else? And then I think about all those things that we talked about on the slide for signs and symptoms, which are changes. So, looking at changes in, interest or activity. And, if your child was someone who loved to go to the movies with friends, and all of a sudden the friends are going to the movies and your child is not, or your teen is not, those to me are red flags. So when things aren't getting better, when they're atypical from other kids in that age group, if I have concerns about safety, and then really those big changes in what is happening, to me, those are red flags, because I also have a 14-year-old who, even if he knew I mentioned him on this webinar, I would be in trouble. So I think that even knowing that, it is typical for teens to want to be alone, but they're not going to want to be alone when you're doing something that they love. They should want to be included in that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Another question we've received is around non-food events and inclusion. So one of the viewers asked, how can we advocate for moving away from food-based awards at school? Our PTA throws pizza parties and pretzel events. How do we encourage our PTA, our other groups, to move away from these type of events for inclusion?
Yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Fighting over the question. I love it. But I think that, as food allergy parents, we've probably all been in this situation. And I I've found that first it's awareness. I think that sometimes we're so embedded in what we have done forever that knowing that what we have done could potentially be excluding kids. I think it's about awareness and teaching schools and anyone else involved, coaches, sporting events, at the end of a sporting event to congratulate or reward that there are kids that are going to feel left out. So I think that that's the first is awareness. I know that where I started, and Tamara, I'd love to hear where you started too, is there were times that I just initiated in doing the non-food and with discussions with whomever was involved, but saying, okay, it's Halloween, rather than doing this trunk or treat, I will set up, a trunk or treat where there's no food. And whether you take that on yourself or give the school the ideas to do that, I think it really comes down to awareness with that activity excludes kids. And we don't want to do that. So I think that that's an amazing point. But Tamara, I would love to hear how you've handled that.
Well, I ended up becoming a room parent and then got sucked into being a PTA president. So I'm not saying that that's the route everyone wants to go or has time to do. But in any case, I think what you said is great. And to just jump off of that, it's come up with something that's creative, give creative ideas, right? The response that typically I hear is, but that's how it's always been done. Okay, but let's try it this new way. And you can, again, starting with that, what can be done to be more inclusive question. I also ask questions of, well, just because food has been offered, what's the value of having the food there versus removing the food and offering another game, right? If you talk to many of the teachers, especially at school parties, it's a pain in the butt to have food in the classroom and clean up and like change gears and stuff. So offering another solution of, well, instead of having food, because I'm not really sure what value other than excitement it brings, what if we have this other fun game or this other activity and we just kind of keep it all about games? So be ready with creative ideas. Hello, Pinterest.
Love it. I know we're running low on time, but such good questions. I'm going to try to get in a few more. Tamara, I think this is a great question for you. One of our attendees asked, how do you express to a new therapist not familiar with food allergy anxiety that the new symptoms of bullying and depression just aren't that teen angst that we were talking about?
This is tough because the percentage of therapists and behavioral healthcare providers out there that are not allergy informed is much higher than those of us that are allergy informed. And so it's really having the conversation of really helping them understand what living with food allergies is like. And that's unfortunate that sometimes we have to even educate our healthcare providers about that. I wish that wasn't the case and that we all were trained with that kind of information, but we're not. And so again, I would be not afraid to lead that conversation. And if the therapist is pushing back on that, it's okay to push back on your therapist and say, I really, again, my gut's telling me, or this behavior or this example, I really think, I'm not sure I answered the person's question, and I certainly can share some more, but.
No, I think that was perfect, Tamara. And what we can also do is add the link to your website to the chat so that folks can see the directory of allergy-informed therapists that you have. So I'm going to combine the last two questions into one. And first want to just say on a positive note, there were so many stories in the chat in the Q&A box around allyship, and whether it is your child's friends really rallying around them, or it's others that are really helping to protect our children. And so one question related to that is, how do you shift from being the educator for the whole school to really giving over that to others because you're just one person? And then are there additional resources that you recommend that the audience can check out as it relates to education and awareness?
I'll just jump in with one of the things that can be suggested is, and again, not every school is going to feel comfortable with this, is developing a committee on the PTO or the PTA that is either just a food allergy awareness committee or is sort of a health management committee? Because again, we're not just talking about kids with food allergy, we're talking about kids with diabetes and other food-based or childhood diagnoses that impact what they're able to do or eat, or how people might perceive them carrying medication. So if you yourself don't want to be the person who's always driving that, maybe finding a couple of other parents in the community and then making the suggestion to develop this committee on PT or PTA, maybe getting your nurse involved in supporting that as well, and then go from there.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that I wasn't able to see what was going on in the chat, but I love that that's where people went, because I can say that for my son with food allergies, I feel like his group of boys, they have his back. And as they grow older, they will start to understand that in different ways. Just one more thing about how can you help to influence your school before working at FAIR. So this is no plug for FAIR. Well, it is, but I actually use the resources through FAIR on foodallergy.org to give them to my school. It was so easy, especially we implemented it during Food Allergy Awareness Week. And I provided the resources to my school's administrators and teachers, and they used some of the courses that are on foodallergy.org to just be able to create that awareness, education, and teaching other kids within the school how to be a good food allergy friend.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to our speakers today, Dr. Kelly Cleary and Tamara Hubbard, for this wonderful presentation. Thank you to you all for attending. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thank you.